Your dog is looking at you right now. Not at the food bowl, not at the window, not at anything moving or interesting or worth investigating. At you. Just you. And if you look back, really look back, not glance, but hold their gaze for a few seconds, something happens between you. Something you can feel, but probably can't explain. A warmth, a pull, the strange sensation that this animal, this creature with a brain a fraction of the size of yours, is somehow reading you, somehow inside you in a way that feels impossible given the biology involved. Most people chalk it up to the bond, to years of living together, to love in whatever form love takes between species. But neuroscientists have been studying this exact moment, the moment of mutual gaze between a dog and a human, for the last 2 decades. And what they've found doesn't just explain why your dog stares at you. It rewrites everything we thought we understood about how two minds connect across the barrier of species. Because here's what's actually happening when your dog looks into your eyes. They're not just seeing you, they're building you. Piece by piece, sense by sense, moment by moment, constructing a neurological portrait of who you are that is more detailed, more accurate, and more emotionally precise than anything you could put into words. Let's start with what they actually see, because this is the first place most people get it completely wrong. The conventional wisdom is that dogs don't see color the way we do. That to a dog, the world is a washed-out, blurry blur of grays and yellows and fuzzy shapes. And that's partially true. Dogs are dichromats, meaning they have 2 types of cone cells in their retinas compared to our 3. They can't distinguish red from green the way we can. A ripe tomato and the grass around it looks similar to them. But here's what that framing misses entirely. Dogs didn't evolve to see color. They evolved to see movement, contrast, and faces. A 2013 study published in the journal PLOS One by researcher Anna Customers and her team at the University of Veterinary Medicine in Vienna found something that changed the way scientists think about canine visual cognition. When dogs were shown images of human faces versus other objects, even objects they were trained to associate with reward, their gaze fixated disproportionately on the faces. This wasn't just recognition. This was preference, a deep-seated, automatic, neurologically driven pull toward the human face that no amount of training had created because it was there before training began. Researchers began calling it the left gaze bias, and once you know about it, you can't unsee it. When a human looks at another human face, our eyes naturally drift to the right side of their face, which is the left side from our perspective. This is because the right hemisphere of the human brain processes emotion, and the right hemisphere controls the left side of the face, which means the left side of someone's face is typically more emotionally expressive. We do this automatically, unconsciously. It's so consistent across cultures that researchers use it as a measure of social attention. And dogs, only when looking at human faces, do the exact same thing. Not when they look at other dogs, not when they look at objects, not when they look at photographs of any other animal on Earth. Only human faces. A team at the University of Lincoln published the research confirming this in 2008, and the finding was so surprising that it was replicated multiple times before the scientific community fully accepted it, because what it suggests is profound. Dogs evolved a specific neurological bias calibrated specifically to human emotional expression that mirrors our own. They're not just looking at you, they're looking at you the same way you look at another person. Now here's where it gets deeper. Because the left gaze bias is only the beginning, it tells us where dogs look. It doesn't tell us what they do with what they see. For that, we need to understand something called social referencing. And to understand social referencing, we need a room, a fan, and 75 very confused dogs.
In 2012, researchers at the University of Milan, the same group who had been studying canine attachment for years, set up one of the most elegant experiments in the history of animal behavior research. They brought dogs into an unfamiliar room. In that room, they placed a large electric fan. The fan was covered in green ribbons. It was on. The ribbons were swirling.
The dogs had never seen anything like it. What do you do when you encounter something strange and unfamiliar and you don't know if it's dangerous? You look to someone you trust. You look for a signal. You read the room. And that is exactly what the dogs did. 83% of dogs, upon encountering the fan, turned immediately to look at their owner's face. Not the researcher's face, not a stranger in the corner, their owner. And then they watched, carefully, attentively. And then they acted, based entirely on what their owner's expression communicated. When the owner made a positive, open, welcoming expression, the dog approached the fan, sometimes even explored it. When the owner made a tense, worried, negative expression, the dog moved away. The dog wasn't reacting to the fan. The dog was reading the owner, using the human face as a real-time information source about a world it didn't fully understand. Researchers call this behavior social referencing. It's the same behavior a human toddler uses when they encounter something unfamiliar. They look back at the parent, read the parent's face, and calibrate their response accordingly. And here is the part that changes everything. This behavior doesn't exist in wolves. Even wolves raised by humans, socialized from birth, living in human homes, they don't do it. They don't show the left gaze bias. They don't check your face before deciding whether to approach something strange. This is not a behavior that any animal with enough exposure to humans eventually develops. This is something that had to be selected for, something that emerged over tens of thousands of years of dogs and humans living together so tightly that the ability to read a human face became as important to a dog's survival as the ability to find food. Your dog is not looking at you because it loves you. It is looking at you because looking at you is how it navigates reality. You are its primary source of information about the world. That stare is not sentiment. It is intelligence operating at its full capacity.
But here's the question nobody asks. If dogs are this sophisticated at reading human faces, if they evolved a neurological architecture specifically designed for this, what exactly do they see when they look at us? Do they just see expressions, smiles, frowns, fear? Or do they see something more? In 2016, a team of researchers at the University of Lincoln published a study that produced one of the most surprising findings in canine cognition research. They trained dogs to touch one of two screens, one showing a happy human face, one showing an angry human face, and rewarded one option consistently. The dogs learned the task. Then they made it harder. They cut each face in half, just the upper half or just the lower half, scrambled the images, showed familiar faces versus unfamiliar faces, mixed and matched. And what they found was that dogs weren't just memorizing facial templates. They were computing emotion across partial information. They could identify an angry face from just the upper half, the brow, the eyes, even if they'd never been trained on upper halves specifically. They could generalize across faces they'd never seen before. They understood that a certain configuration of features, regardless of which face it appeared on, meant something. They have a concept of human emotional expression, not a memory, not an association, a concept. But it doesn't stop there, because the face is only one channel of information, and your dog is running several of them simultaneously. Dr. Attila Andix, the researcher at Eötvös Loránd University in Budapest, who ran some of the first fMRI brain scans ever conducted on dogs,
and we'll come back to those brain scans because they're extraordinary, found something that should be impossible. Dogs integrate facial expression and vocal tone.
We knew they understood tone of voice. We knew they understood expressions. What nobody had established was whether these two sources of information were processed together. Whether a dog hearing a praising voice while seeing an angry face experienced conflict the way a human would. They do. When dogs heard a tone of voice that was consistent with the facial expression they saw, a happy voice paired with a happy face, an angry voice paired with an angry face, their responses were fast, clear, consistent. When the signals were contradictory, a cheerful tone with a cold expression, a scolding tone with a warm smile, the dogs showed measurable confusion, longer reaction times, more hesitation. They're not reading your face, they're not reading your voice, they're reading you, the composite signal, the full bandwidth transmission of your internal state, and when the channels don't agree, they know it. This is why you cannot lie to a dog. Not effectively, anyway. You can say "good boy" in a warm voice and put on a smile while feeling exhausted and empty inside, and your dog will look at you and they will know something is off because the full information they're receiving, the micro-expressions your face makes before you consciously compose it, the tension in your posture, the cortisol in your breath, isn't matching the performed signal you're sending. Scientists at the Max Planck Institute confirmed in research published in 2021 that dogs can detect cortisol, the primary human stress hormone, in human breath and sweat with remarkable sensitivity. They can smell your anxiety before you've consciously registered it yourself. So when your dog stares at you, they are reading your face, they are listening to your voice, they are analyzing the cortisol in your breath. They are processing micro-movements in your body posture. They are cross-referencing everything against months and years of stored data about who you are when you're calm, who you are when you're worried, who you are when you're trying to pretend you're fine.
And they're building a picture of your internal state that is, in some ways, more accurate than your own. Now, let's talk about the brain, because this is where it gets truly extraordinary. In 2014, Dr. Gregory Burns at Emory University did something nobody had done before. He trained dogs to lie completely still inside an fMRI scanner, without sedation, without restraint, completely voluntarily. And he scanned their brains while showing them different stimuli. The question he was trying to answer was simple and profound. What is actually happening inside a dog's brain when it encounters human social information? The results should be taught in every psychology class on the planet. When dogs were exposed to the scent of a familiar human, their owner, a specific region of their brain activated strongly. That region was the caudate nucleus, the same region that activates in the human brain in response to things we love, to things we anticipate with pleasure, to music that moves us, to the face of someone we are deeply attached to. Not food, not other dogs, not novel smells, not toys. The owner's scent produced the strongest caudate activation of any stimulus tested. You are, at a neurological level, encoded in your dog's brain as the most rewarding thing in their world. But Burns went further. He designed an experiment to test something that philosophers had debated for centuries. Is a dog's love for its owner genuine? Is it intrinsic? Or is it always ultimately about the food, the walks, the resources, a transactional relationship dressed up in soft fur and warm eyes? He compared two conditions. In one, a handler the dog knew well but not the owner gave the dog food. In the other, a handler the dog didn't know gave praise. And then he compared the caudate response to the owner giving praise versus giving food.
Owner praise activated the caudate more than food from a stranger. For most dogs, owner praise activated the caudate as strongly as food from the owner. And for roughly 20% of the dogs tested, 1 in 5, owner praise produced more caudate activation than food. 20% of dogs preferred being praised by their person to being fed. When your dog looks at you with those eyes, they're not calculating whether you have a treat. For many of them, the calculation has already been run, and you won, not the treat. Let's go back to the mutual gaze, because we started there and we need to finish there, because this is the thing that ties everything together. In 2015, the team at Azabu University in Japan published a study in Science, the journal, not the concept, that measured oxytocin levels in 30 dog-owner pairs during a 30-minute interaction. The setup was simple. Owners sat with their dogs, the dogs could do what they wanted. Researchers measured oxytocin in urine samples before and after, and they tracked one specific behavior during the interaction: how much the dog and owner engaged in mutual gaze. The results rewrote the relationship between dogs and humans at a chemical level. Dogs that spent more time gazing at their owners showed larger oxytocin increases. Owners who received more gaze showed larger oxytocin increases. The more they looked at each other, the more bonded both of them became, chemically, measurably, simultaneously. And here's the critical piece. They ran the same experiment with wolves raised by humans, wolves who had grown up around people, wolves who were comfortable with humans in a way that wild wolves never could be. The loop didn't activate. The wolves didn't show the same pattern of increased gazing. The oxytocin didn't spike the same way. The cross-species chemical bond that forms between a dog and a human through mutual eye contact, that loop, did not exist in wolves.
It had to be built, selected for, across thousands of generations of dogs living alongside humans. A neurochemical mechanism evolved specifically to deepen the bond between these two species through the act of looking at each other. Every time your dog holds your gaze, they are activating that mechanism. They are releasing a surge of oxytocin in their own brain, and if you hold their gaze back, you release it too. And the surge in them makes them want to keep looking, which makes you feel more bonded, which makes you look back. It is a loop that exists for one purpose: to bind you together. No other animal shares this with us. Not our closest primate relatives, not the cats in the same household, not any other domesticated species on Earth. Just dogs. There's one more thing you need to know, and it matters in a way that goes beyond science. Everything we've discussed, the left gaze bias, the social referencing, the caudate activation, the oxytocin loop, all of it depends on safety, on trust, on the dog having a secure enough relationship with their human that they're willing to look. A traumatized dog doesn't hold your gaze. A fearful dog looks away, rolls over, makes themselves small. A dog that has learned that human attention precedes punishment won't meet your eyes.
Sustained eye contact in many animal species is a threat signal. It is only between dogs and humans that it evolved to mean something entirely different. And it only means that different thing, connection, safety, love, between a specific dog and the specific human they have chosen to trust. So if your dog looks at you, really looks at you, holds your gaze without looking away, watches your face when you speak, tracks you across the room with their eyes, that is not a small thing. That is 15,000 years of evolution expressing itself in a single moment. That is a nervous system that has been calibrated specifically to read your face. That is a brain that has encoded you as its most rewarding stimulus.
That is an oxytocin system firing in both directions simultaneously across the boundary of species through the ancient mechanism of simply looking at each other. When your dog looks into your eyes, they see the most important thing in their world. And the science, every study, every brain scan, every oxytocin measurement, every carefully designed experiment agrees on what they're seeing. They're seeing you completely, accurately, without judgment or pretense. Maybe more clearly than anyone else ever has. If this changed how you see the next time your dog catches your eye, subscribe to this channel and drop a comment below. Does your dog hold your gaze, or do they always look away first? Because the answer tells you something, and the next video explains exactly what.